Let's begin. Great understanding is torpid. Petty understanding is scrupulous. Great speech is ablaze. Petty speech is shrill. Falling asleep, one's soul is all mixed up. Waking up, one's body opens up. What one encounters, one engages with. Day after day, one struggles with one's mind, confused as one is, contorted as one is, inarticulate as one is. Petty fears put one on edge, great fears perturb. Their shooting forth is straight and fast as from a crossbow, and that counts as sorting out right and wrong. One stays stuck as if sworn to one's views by an ancestral oath, and this counts as guaranteeing victory. One withers away like autumn and winter, and that speaks to how day by day one fades. What one is drowned in, and what one has done, one cannot be made to return to. One is locked down as if sealed shut, and that speaks to the tedium of one's old age, and as one's mind closes in on death, nothing will allow it to return to the liveliness of young. Joy, anger, grief, delight, deliberation, wistfulness, change of heart and stubborn insistence, decency, profligacy, open spontaneity, and ebullience, these are but music emerging from what is empty in itself, mere steam bringing forth mushrooms. Day and night they take turns before us, and no one understands wherefrom they sprout forth. Enough, enough. From morning to evening we are faced with these things. They are the sources from which we arise. Without that other there is no ego self. Without an ego self there would be nothing that is chosen. This surely comes close enough. But one does not know for what purpose it is caused to be the way it is. It is as though there were a veritable manager. The only thing is, one does not find any indication of that master. That it is possible to act is true enough, but one does not see that manager's shape. He has an essential reality, but no external form. All one's joints, one's 9 apertures, one's 6 internal organs, they are provided and in place. But with which am I to identify? You should be satisfied with them all. But is there one among them with whom one is particularly intimate? If they are all intimate in this way, are they then all flunkies, male and female? But if they are flunkies, male and female, they are not in a position to keep order among each other. Or are they then rulers and subjects for each other, taking turns? Or, again, is there one veritable ruler among them? But no matter whether I seek and find this essential reality or not, this will neither strengthen nor weaken its veritable status. Once one has received one's ready-made form, then one does not lose it until it's all over. One comes to blows with things, has one's brushes with things, moving as in a gallop, the whole lot of them, and nothing is capable of calming one down so as to stop up. Is that not a tragedy? All life one slaves away, and does not get to see any results achieved. All worn out one slaves away, painfully, never knowing what it is all about. Can one fail to be upset by this? Others point out that at least one is not dead. But where does that help? One's body degenerates, and so does one's mind. Can one fail to take this to be the great ordeal of one's life? While man is alive, he is inherently in this kind of muddle. Or, perchance, I alone am in that muddle, and there are others who are not muddled. Now, if one follows one's entrenched mindset as one's teacher, then who in the world would be without a teacher? Why should one have to understand the contingency of things in order to make one's own choice with one's mind? Even the benighted have one such entrenched mindset. Before having established one's mindset, to have notions of right and wrong, that is like, as absurd as, today setting out for Yue and arriving yesterday. That is to pass off what does not exist as existing. But if you pass off what does not exist as existing, then even if a spiritual emperor, Yu, came along, he would still be incapable of understanding what you are saying. How in the world could I ever manage? That's the end of the section there. So let's go back. And again, if anyone wants the microphone, feel free to request it. But I'm going to go back to the beginning and I'm going to reread it. But this time, add some of my own thoughts and look at some of the commentators. Again, one of the strengths of this edition is that it is, as it says, with copious annotations from the Chinese commentaries. But as we found out in the last space, I think it is a good book in that it does highlight a lot of different commentators, but it's too short. It's unable to really present the different commentators in their fullness. So it kind of picks and chooses them piecemeal, and it presents them piecemeal. So it's a little unsatisfying, but it is a good I suppose resource if you want to see the general lay of the land and get some good leads to follow up on, which I did not follow up on for this space, but that's life, or is it? We'll find out. I'm just trying to see here on Twitter how do I figure out how to do this? Hold on. Well, whatever. I was trying to... here we go. Alright, there we go. I was just making sure I could see who had joined the space and whether we did have any speakers. Like I said, hopefully this will be a quick and somewhat quiet space. But I do have a bit of time if anyone joins in. So one thing I do have is I do have another text that is Guo Xiang's commentary, and I'm therefore able to at least have his full commentary in front of me while I do this, which we're going to find is somewhat advantageous here, because he has a lot of interesting things to say. And of the commentators I'm familiar with so far, I'm a very big fan of his work. I almost want to say I suppose you have to read him a certain way, but in many ways Guo Xiang is rather Parmenidean at times, at least the way I interpret the Eleatics, in the sense that there doesn't seem to have to be a cause for existence. But how much that's going to influence our reading of what we just read today, I don't know. And actually we're going to find that his commentary on the beginning of 2.2 here, this section, is, I don't want to say uninspired, but it doesn't really speak to me really. So we have the beginning here, and also another thing is, depending on if you're going to focus on a particular commentator on a text, like someone who's describing the text, your translation of the text is going to be different, because presumably the people writing the book that I put up in the nest are trying to present a wide variety of different commentaries, and therefore I almost want to say that they're in a very difficult position of trying to present a translation that makes all the different commentators still make sense, like not seem to be coming out of left field and not really following the text, because the different commentators may have different readings, at times maybe even radically different. Maybe they think that, for example, in the last reading we did, that point about, well, nothing lies behind the puffing into action. There's no creator of reality. Well, that translation works for someone like Guo Xiang, but the other commentators who are saying, oh yeah, he's saying there's a Zhao Wu, there's like a person who makes the things, an infingerator or a transmogrifier, as this book has it. That's a totally different translation or different reading of the text, and so I think depending on which commentator you're going with, if you're going to read the text and then read their comments on it, you kind of have to be careful with how you're reading the Chinese or what translation you're going with, because otherwise their comments are not going to line up with the text the way that they may have intended it to. But just reading the beginning, it says, great understanding is torpid, petty understanding is scrupulous, great speech is ablaze, petty speech is shrill. You know, I don't know what to do with that. It's like, all right, I can see on the Chinese there's some sort of rhyming pattern here. I never learned how to read these attempts at recreating ancient rhyming. You see how it says in the screenshot Grian, and then underneath that Krian, and then Gwjam, Tjam. Obviously that's not pinyin. I don't know what sort of modern attempt at reading ancient Chinese that is. But you can just see even in the pinyin it has a sort of the final two characters are repeated, and so it does sound kind of funny. You know, it's like a da yan, I guess yan yan or tan tan, and then xiao yan dan dan. So it's like yan yan dan dan. It's like, okay, you're just duplicating these syllables, but I guess maybe in the ancient recreation of the ancient pronunciation it sounds different. I'm not sure, but then again they don't even know where ZhuangZi is from, so you know, I guess there'd be regional differences too, right? But in terms of the meaning for those phrases, actually for that whole stretch, like from great understanding is torpid down to falling asleep, one's soul is all mixed up, waking up, one's body opens up, what one encounters, engages with, day after day, one struggles with one's mind. The even for Guoxiang, he's kind of uninspired here. He just says, you know, we'll do the first two. Great understanding is torpid, petty understanding is scrupulous. And then Guoxiang says, this addresses the difference in intelligence. All right, thank you for that comment. Great speech is ablaze, petty speech is shrill. This addresses the difference in the use of words. And so on and so forth for basically that entire page and a bit. And so that doesn't really mean much to me, so it's hard for me to also come up with anything brilliant to say about it. I guess it's almost, you know, if we were talking about the myriad of all things, and I guess the Tian Lai, the pipes of heaven, is supposed to be the myriad of all things and all things that can be. And maybe when we say great understanding is torpid, petty understanding is scrupulous, great speech is ablaze, petty speech is shrill, we're like going through and naming all these things and their different qualities. Maybe he's kind of laying the stage for a very complex and detailed world full of opposites or extremes, and kind of showing how grand it all is, maybe. I know there are some commentators that maybe, you know, it looks like a person called Gui You Guang from the 16th century. He has a comment on great understanding is torpid, petty understanding is scrupulous, great speech is ablaze, petty speech is shrill. He says, only when the understanding contains large versus small does speech come to contain large versus small. Okay, so maybe he's trying to interpret these sections as, you know, great speech is ablaze, petty speech is shrill. Maybe he's trying to classify different types of speech and saying where their limits are and what they need in order to contain certain other things. Again, this is just one line from Gui You Guang. I don't know what the rest of what he said is. But if anyone wanted to breathe more meaning into those lines than what Guoxiang does, maybe check out Gui You Guang. I haven't read him, sadly. Day after day, one struggles with one's mind, confused as one is, contorted as one is, inarticulate as one is. Petty fears put one on edge, great fears perturb. You know, there's a footnote here that's rather interesting. It says A.C. Graham translates the supreme fear calms for great fears perturb. And he says, the supreme fear which calms would be the fear of death, reconciliation with which is ZhuangZi's central concern. So yeah, if we read that as petty fears put one on edge, like the small things are putting us on edge, but when we realize the great fear, or the supreme fear, could calm us down. And again, I have to sympathize with the translators here. That line about petty fear puts one on edge, great fears perturb. I can see again it's doing this rhyming thing where they're duplicating the last two characters. And, you know, I can kind of see how you get both readings out of that. I mean, obviously petty fear and great fear, whether we call it supreme fear or not, is all the same, but I think it would be challenging. It's almost like that first reading in the first space where it was a bunch of sounds. The words were just representing sounds, like onomatopoeia or whatever it's called. And now we have this use of these rhyming couplets where it's just like duplicating the last character in the line and lining them up like that, so it makes almost like a chanting sound or a sing-song kind of effect. But in any event, I kind of sympathize with A.C. Graham's reading there. That's one thing meaningful to take in it, because ZhuangZi is particularly concerned with reconciling one to death, or at least reconciling one's place in the world and being happy with what one is and being what one is, without chasing after things and tiring yourself out and dying without having achieved anything, or without ever coming to peace with yourself and what you are. So whether that's to be read into that line, I don't know. I don't think, what was his name, Gui Guang would read that into that line, but that's certainly, A.C. Graham, I think, is right to say that the reconciliation with death is one of ZhuangZi's central concerns. And as for Guoxiang, what he has is, let's see here, what he says. Again, he just says, this addresses the different kinds of fear. Again, many thanks, Guoxiang. Petty fears put one on edge, great fears perturb. Guoxiang says, this addresses the different kinds of fear. Alright. Their shooting forth is straight and as fast as from a crossbow, and that counts as sorting out right and wrong. One stays stuck as if sworn to one's views by an ancestral oath, and this counts as guaranteeing victory. I think this is foreshadowing what we find later in this section, where we said, before having established one's mindset to have notions of right and wrong, that is absurd as saying, today setting out for Yue and arriving yesterday. Again, if people have this, they shoot out straight and fast as from a crossbow and say, that's right, that's wrong, that's right, that's wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is right. If they're shooting around and sorting out right and wrong from their individual perspective that way, maybe that's going to be taken up at the end of this section, where he's saying, what are you doing sorting out right and wrong before you have established some normative standard for that that could actually perform such a thing? It's kind of absurd. And so when he's turning to the absurd behavior of people. And he says, of course, one stays stuck as if sworn to one's views by an ancestral oath, and this counts as guaranteeing victory. It doesn't have to be read that way, but I like this reading in that it's almost like saying, not only have we got this issue with sorting out right and wrong like a crossbow, just going, oh, I don't like that, I like that, I don't like that, I like that. He also is saying, and you know what, the people that do that, they stay stuck in their mindset or in their position as if sworn to it by an ancestral oath, and kind of getting their way with those declarations of right and wrong and not being budged to see the bigger picture or to establish a normative standard that can be more holistic. Maybe that counts as guaranteeing victory for them. They got their way, and also they refused to be less partisan, I suppose. One withers away like autumn and winter, and that speaks to how day by day one fades, what one is drowned in, and what one has done, one cannot be made to return to. Yeah, I mean, if it's just supposed to be a depressing text where he's saying, we fade each day, and we can't undo the past, and one is locked down as if sealed shut, and that speaks to the tedium of one's old age, and as one's mind closes in on death, nothing will allow it to return to the liveliness of young. That could just be read as something very kind of a depressing account of what it feels like to be alive and look back at the past and know you can't undo it, and you've faded in your young or in your lively productive energies or masculine energy, and there's nothing you can do to avoid death. Goodbye. I don't think that's ultimately the conclusion the text wants us to draw. It's just maybe highlighting how depressed some people feel about that, and then we're going to discuss it. But another thing I read from one of the commentators, that was a good point, is the way they read it. It's not ZhuangZi's, it's another commentator. But the way they read it was that it's more like if you are engaging in this sort of acting like a crossbow and saying, I like that, I don't like that, and then getting involved in partisan politics and in all sorts of schemes and all these petty disputes, and it kind of it ties you down, or it'll just trap you in the end. And as you get old and more tired, you can't escape that, and you can't clean yourself out from that, and therefore you can't return to the liveliness of young. You can't regain the young because your whole life you've been engaged in these petty squabbles, your partisan politics, you've been trying to get that, not that, and racing around and butting heads and gathering things for yourself, and ultimately all these games and things catch up with you and end you. And given the characters, what they say is that it's almost like if you have a field for agriculture, it can be full with silt, I guess. So the water will carry a lot of dirt and clog things up. And so if you engage in that sort of lifestyle, you wind up getting clogged up with all those schemes and interests and disputes. And it clogs up, and you slow down, and you can't move, and you just become, I guess, cold and dead and motionless. But if you free yourself from those petty interests and petty disputes and machinations about who controls what and who can do what and who should like who, etc. If you free yourself from that, then you will not be bogged down. You won't be gathering that silt that will slowly drag you down and I suppose render you motionless or trap you or drown you, essentially. And you can see in the original there why they might find that reading, but that's another commentator. I do kind of like that reading, actually. ZhuangZi has a more, I suppose, he doesn't say a lot, but he says, here we go. They steadily deteriorate day by day, and he says, their ruination becomes more pronounced day by day. Such is how some fare. Then he skips down. They are obsessed with their pursuits. Such is how some behave. And further down. They are so satiated with desire that the older they are, the more occluded they become. Alright, well, occluded? What would be a, I suppose, better word? I guess like clogged up. But essentially he's making that point that I just said. So I guess it is also from ZhuangZi, but actually there's a commentator who commentates on ZhuangZi, and he also has this reading. They're looking at the word, where is it here? What do you have? Yi yan qi lao, xu, yeah. That's xu. So it's like that's what they're translating that way. So it's kind of like silted up and clogged up. Yeah. They are so satiated with desire that the older they are, the more occluded they become. Occluded being the xu. So I guess the more clogged up they become due to being tangled in this web of desire and activities. When a mind is so close to death, there is no way to have it recover the young life force. Again, this is another translation that was given with the Guoxiang commentary. It says, trying to turn calamity to advantage and thinking light of disaster, yin, death, ties off attempts to fulfill ambition. Such is how some behave. Alright. Well, enough about that. Let's keep going. Joy, anger, grief and delight, deliberation, wistfulness, change of heart, and stubborn insistence, decency, profligacy, open spontaneity, and ebullience. These are but music emerging from what is empty in itself, mere steam bringing forth mushrooms. Okay, again, it's like a long list of attributes or characteristics. What I did find interesting is when we get to the mere steam bringing forth mushrooms. Or these are but music emerging from what is empty in itself, mere steam bringing forth mushroom. If we go here to hold on, let me bring this up. This is a different book with another commentator in it. But I think this commentator does a really good job tying this back to the previous chapter with the Tian Lai, the pipes of heaven, right? So we go 14, Cheng Xuan Ying. He says, the interior of woodwind instruments consists of emptiness. Thus, it emerges as elegant music. In humid summer, the air is steamy. Thus, it forms into morning mushrooms. This is very similar to the way of heaven and earth and the myriad things. It has about it the unreality of illusion, as if from nothingness, phenomenal reality were produced, as, for example, how mushrooms and music come into existence. As such ephemerality and illusion are involved, why should one ever engage in joy or anger? Well, I would cut off the last sentence there, because I'm not trying to take it as an ethical point, but I do like how it ties into some metaphysical topics, because it says, here we go. All these, so he lists out the I guess, emotions and behavior: joy, anger, grief, delight, deliberation, wistfulness, change of heart, stubborn insistence, decency, profligacy, open spontaneity, ebullience. And then we get down to the section that was just commentated on. These are but music, emerging from what is empty in itself, mere steam bringing forth mushrooms. So what did we say about the music? Well, it's like a pipe is empty. It has nothing inside it, right? But it brings forth music. And again, we were just talking about pipes in the beginning of the Qi Wu Luan. And so that's a nice tie back there. And it sounds like the way they thought mushrooms were produced is humidity. And again, I guess steam or humid air is almost kind of like nothing as well. It's just air, right? But yet we have mushrooms from it. And so I suppose if we're going to be talking about the way of heaven or being or what is, or the, well, I don't want to get into like the dark feminine or anything like that from the Tao Te Ching and what. We won't go too far from this text, but maybe maybe as well he's talking about how being per se or Tao per se or Tian Lai itself, it's kind of like that empty air in the pipe or the steam. It's just kind of air, has nothing substantive to it, because the fact of unity or the fact of existence, it almost doesn't have a particular limited form, right? So it's like, how do you grasp it? And yet it's everywhere and all things are. So, I like that observation. It's like, hey, all these particular things, the myriad of things here given as emotions and behavior, they're just like the music that comes from the emptiness of the pipe. They're just like the mushrooms that come forward from the humid air. Because again, all things are, ultimately rooted in or embodied by or just the expression of the Tian Lai, which is the Wan Wu, is just all things, according to Guo Xiang. And of course, according to me too, to the extent that I matter at all. He says, day and night they take turns before us. No one understands wherefrom they sprout forth. Well, right, that's one of the main metaphysical topics of this book, right? Especially to someone like Guo Xiang, who is going to deny causation, and several others, depending on how you read that first section of Qi Wu Luan, we're going to be denying causation. And so, no one understands wherefrom they sprout forth. Well, in a sense, they sprout forth from the fact of existence, but insofar as existence is what it is, they're all ziran, right? They're all what they are in their own right, without a need for someone else to make them what they are, because the thing itself can only be the thing itself, I suppose. But anyway, enough. From morning to evening we are faced with these things. They are the sources from which we arise. Without that other there is no ego self. Without an ego self there would be nothing that is chosen. I guess all things arise from this discussion, right? But this point about the ego self is interesting. Hold on, let me get the commentator here, because I think Guo Xiang makes an interesting comment. Okay, so he's going to translate. Without that other, there is no ego self. Without an ego self, there will be nothing that is chosen. If we're going to give a translation that closely maps onto his commentary, we're going to translate it as, if it were not for that, there would be no I. If there were no I, there would be nothing for it to endow. So it is indeed close by. So now it's almost talking about a discussion we often have about someone who maybe has a hierarchy of being will have this distant God or necessary existence that's far off and then makes other things exist. But of course that's not going to work here, where things are ziran, or I don't like the term spontaneous, but that's what they keep using in the translation, spontaneous. It spontaneously exists or exists in its own right as itself without need for a cause. If we're taking that model of ziran, then we don't get a distant, I guess, Zao Wu or a creator God or a necessary being that emanates us or something, but rather existence is close by, because if we read this as, if it were not for that, namely the fact of existence or what is, if it were not for existence, there would be no I. Okay, fair enough. If we fail to acknowledge there is, then obviously we can't say that anything is. If there were no I, there would be nothing for it to endow. Okay, so if we were to deny that what is had any, this is me reading a lot into this text, but this is how I would want to read it. If there were no I, there would be nothing for it to endow. Okay, so we are saying that, we said, if we deny that there is, we can't say anything is. Okay, so we just shut up. That'll be the end of it. But we're going to say there is. But if there's no I, if there are no things, such as you, me, Guo Xiang, whoever, ZhuangZi, if there's no I, there will be nothing for this fact of is to adhere in. It wouldn't constitute anything. So indeed, we are what is, because there is what is. And what is it? It's us and everything else. It's the Tian Lai as the Wan Wu. So so he says, so it is indeed close by. Ziran or existence or Tao, or whatever we want to say, it's close by because we are what it is. And in the commentary it says, that refers to nature, Ziran. Since nature begets me, I spontaneously generate. Therefore, this nature is my own nature, so how could it be thought something distant? Right, thank you, Gorsia. And actually he drops a footnote to, it's just going to take me to another section of the text. We can pick that up another time. But yeah, like he's saying, that refers to nature. Since nature begets me, I spontaneously generate. Well, I am what I am by virtue of what I am. Therefore, nature is my own nature. So how could it be thought something distant? Again, because we are what is. So whatever we have to say about what is, or being, or existence, it is what we are because we are what exists. Alright. So I thought that part was particularly interesting. And then we say, here we go. This surely comes close enough, but one does not know for what purpose it is caused to be the way it is. It is as though there were a veritable manager. The only thing is, one does not find any indication of that master. That it is possible to act is true enough, but one does not see that manager's shape. He has an essential reality, but no external form. So what does ZhuangZi have to say about that, I wonder? Oh, someone tried to give me a call. Hope it didn't disrupt the recording. Well, anyway, what do we have here? A true Lord might seemingly exist, except we can't find any evidence for it. In the commentary, taking the myriad tendencies of all the myriad things into consideration, their inclinations and disinclinations are all different, and there might seemingly exist a true Lord to cause them all to behave in such ways, but when we look for evidence of this true Lord, from beginning to end we can never find any. Thus it is clear that everything behaves spontaneously, and nothing causes things to behave as they do. That it can move is self-evident, but we see not anything physical to it. And in the commentary, well now, concerning that which moves, it is evident that it can move by itself. Oh yeah, for it has properties, but lacks bodily form. Properties coincide with the thing itself, thus the bodily form for these properties does not appear as something separate. The body has its 100 joints, 9 apertures, 6 viscera, and all continue to survive together in it. Complying with what is natural to them, none fails to survive. So with which, this is kind of a funny part too. Alright, so if we take this, I think we can read that section about the manager in light of the pipes of people, earth, and heaven. And of course, at the pipes of heaven we found that there was no one blowing them, because the pipes of heaven literally are all the things in their own right. It's just constituted as all things. But and so then when we get down here, we're talking about, why is it this way? Is there a manager? It's like, well, we don't see a manager. We just see this enormous mass, I suppose, of all the things that are going on. All possibility realized. But then I like this. It says, all one's joints, one's 9 apertures, one's 6 internal organs. There's an interesting note here that apparently the right kidney is, I guess, distinct from the left kidney. But anyway, one's 6 internal organs, they are provided and in place, but with which am I to identify? That's an interesting question. It's like, are we any more one part than any other? Are we any more our liver than our kidney, or our brain than our heart? I mean, maybe if we see our brain as the seat of reason, I suppose. But at the end of the day, if we're taking ourselves as a complete human with a body and will, I suppose we wouldn't identify with any one thing over another. They would all just be distinct aspects of us. And so maybe reality is ultimately like that. It is a whole. The Tian Lai is a unified whole that is constituted by all things. But the Tian Lai, or the Tao, or whatever, is no more... Well, that's another section of this text, but essentially it's going to be found in everything. It's not going to favor one over the other. It's not going to identify a master or a... what's the term here? A manager. It's not going to be a manager because it's not going to associate with one thing over another. It's just going to be all things. Then it says, with which am I to identify? You should be satisfied with them all. But is there one among them with whom one is particularly intimate? If they are all intimate in this way, are they then all flunkies, male and female? But if they are all flunkies, male and female, they are not in a position to keep order among each other. Or are they then rulers and subjects for each other, taking turns? Or again, is there one veritable ruler among them? But no matter whether I seek and find this essential reality or not, this will neither strengthen nor weaken its veritable status. You know what? I see this section as a back and forth, almost considering different arguments, like argument, counter-argument. And then at the end he's saying, no matter whether I seek and find the essential reality or not, it's not going to strengthen or weaken its veritable status. So he's like, whether or not I figure it out, it is what it is. And apparently we can't find the... it doesn't seem we can locate or identify a manager, but should there be one, he would be what he is, so whatever, whether we find him or not. But indeed, the status seems to be, at least to ZhuangZi and to myself, that there is no manager, but rather it all operates in harmony and all constitutes one big whole, just like a human is constituted as a whole of his different organs and mind and everything. But let me get to the commentary here from ZhuangZi. And he actually reads this argument, counter-argument, as a discussion of how rulers and subjects should behave or relate to one another. Yep. And he has a few interesting statements that are almost, you could almost try drawing lines between them and some ancient Greek thought. The idea of each organ and each limb and each subject or person keeping in their lane and doing what they ought to do, rather than trying to do what others are supposed to do. It's almost like that idea of justice as everyone minding their own business. Well, here, justice or proper operation is where each thing keeps in its lane and does what it is supposed to do. But also, he says here, this is again from ZhuangZi. As long as each servant acts according to his or her allotted capacity, they never fail to manage each other. Managing one another means, for example, that each hand, foot, ear, eye, each of the 4 limbs, and each of the 100 joints, in addition to each having its own jurisdiction, which is what I said, keeping in its own lane, doing its thing, also exercises mutual sovereign control over the others. It's almost reminding me of that Parmenidean point that all things touch all things, right? Everything is all touching. And so I almost want to say, how could an ear, eye, foot, hand, limb, how could any of these things do their job if they don't also have some sort of mutual sovereign control over all the rest of it, or at least link up to it in some way to constitute a whole? It can't just independently act. Every single part of the entity, and I suppose ultimately every single part of reality, all has to be interconnected and work together in some way or fall apart if it doesn't. Or do they take turns in being ruler and subject? Yeah, it's again, ZhuangZi is taking that in a different direction than I would have expected. But I guess he also had political and social concerns. And again, he rejects the idea of a ruler above all, because what is above all is all. Oops, let me just pause this. I think I have a phone call here. Whoops, turns out I have to go. I actually need to go right now, so I'm going to end this recording. Forgot I had to go pick someone up, so I'm going to go get him now. I will just end with the line here. That is to pass off what does not exist as existing, but if you pass off what does not exist as existing, then even if a spiritual Emperor Yu came along, he would still be incapable of understanding what you are saying. How in the world could I ever manage? I may privately extend this recording myself when I put it up on YouTube, but I think the very ending of this section is extremely interesting. In ZhuangZi's commentary, he doesn't really get into the metaphysics of that last section there, but I just find it fascinating where he's saying essentially what the Eleatics are saying, right? If you say what is, not even you can Not even the spiritual emperor Yu can understand that. Shun Yu. How is he going to understand that if you're saying that what is not is? It's just a direct contradiction and nonsense. Now, the reason why he does it is because it's an example of something absurd. And he's saying it's absurd because, just like we saw earlier in this section, one was saying, like a crossbow, saying that's right, that's wrong, before they have a normative standard or some not reputable, but some worthy mindset or standard to apply to draw those right-wrong distinctions. And so if you're making right-wrong distinctions before you have that, it's absurd as saying I'm setting out for somewhere and I'll arrive there yesterday. Obviously, you're going to have to arrive there tomorrow. It's just incoherent if you're saying that you leave now and get there yesterday. And similarly, if you say, look, here is what is not, what is Shun Yu going to do with that? What is anyone going to do with that? And indeed, I think that is actually the ultimately the greatest philosophical error possible, and one that I think is just threads through almost all Western philosophy other than Eleatic philosophy that I see, which is very unfortunate because it makes me think that it's all just nonsense, which is obviously not the popular view. But it's very heartwarming to see that not only do I have people like Parmenides and Melissus recognize this, that what is not is just incoherent nonsense, because what is, and that's all there is. But also we have ZhuangZi here arguably saying the same thing. Look, 是以无有为有，无有为有. Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. How are you going to take what is not to serve as what is? And if you do, it's going to be complete nonsense. And that's also how I read the Guoxiang commentary, Guoxiang's metaphysics. But although he doesn't get into it too much in that section, which is unfortunate. It would have been nice to see him really lay it out there as well. I also see earlier in the text it says, moving is in a gallop, the whole lot of them. That line as well, it sounds like it's sort of harkens to another section of the ZhuangZi where he says life is like, a horse galloping past a hole in the wall and whoosh, now it's over. So yeah. Actually, I'm not going to change this recording. I'm going to chuck it up. It was sort of spur of the moment. I'll throw it up on YouTube and I'm going to end it now. Thank you, Catcher. I see you're still here. Sorry I have to cut it off. I have to head out. But very happy to have you here. And I will continue reading this text another day. Maybe on Friday, maybe next week. Who knows? Thank you.